Coming up on Dr. Kiki's Science Hour, we're talking about Scitable, a collaborative learning space for students, with Vikram Savkar from the Nature Publishing Group. That's up next on Dr. Kiki's Science Hour.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Dr. Kiki's Science Hour is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Dr. Kiki's Science Hour with Dr. Kiki Sanford, episode number 83, recorded on Thursday, February 10th, 2011. Collaboration and education. This episode of Dr. Kiki's Science Hour is sponsored by MailRoute. Visit mailroute.info and sign up with the email filtering service that Tom and Leo use. Welcome, everyone, to another episode. It's episode number 83 of Dr. Kiki's Science Hour. I'm Dr. Kiki Sanford, and today, you ready? We're going to get down and dirty into the world of science education. That's right. Today, we're going to be speaking with Vikram Savkar from Nature Publishing Group, and he's involved in a collaborative website, a collaborative web educational website for science. Vikram joined NPG, Nature Publishing Group, to launch Nature Education, a branch of the Nature Group, in January of 2007. Nature Education publishes innovative, high-quality products for graduate, undergraduate, high school science students worldwide. Prior to NPG, Vikram held a number of management roles in digital and textbook publishing over a 10-year career at Pearson Higher Education, so he has a long career working in the textbook and education field. And prior to that, served for 3 years as assistant to the conductor of the Boston Philharmonic Orchestra. I don't know how those things go together, but it's an interesting story in itself. Vikram received degrees in physics and classics from Harvard University. But now, Vikram, welcome to the show. You're working in looking at education in the biological sciences with this Nature website, Scitable.
That's right. First of all, thank you very much for having me on the show. Yes, we are focusing on the biological sciences initially on Scitable, which is our online, globally accessible, open, which means cost-free library of teaching and learning materials in the sciences aimed at college and high school students. We chose to focus on biology for a number of reasons, but one of them is that it's such a crucial issue for the future of so many countries. When we're focusing on pandemic diseases or food security, so many of the issues that touch our lives and that will define our futures over the next 50 years turn on the biological sciences. So as a company that publishes research by scientists and for scientists, we care very passionately to make sure that there are scientists in every country of the world over the next century working on these critical problems. And biology was a great place for us to start.
Now, in terms of the resource that you're developing with Nature Education on Scitable, I'm familiar with Nature, the scientific journal, Nature Publishing Group. Most times when you go to the journal to look up a scientific article, it's locked behind a paywall. That's not the case for Scitable, though, is it?
That's true. One of our core principles in creating Scitable was the belief that we want to democratize science education. We believe that access to a high-quality education in the sciences, whether after that you end up becoming a researcher or just a science-literate citizen, should be something that everybody has an equal chance to, no matter what country they're from, no matter what gender they are, no matter what their socioeconomic background is. And certainly in the United States, access to high-quality information is restricted by the price of some expensive resources, but particularly when you look worldwide, most students don't even have a chance to buy textbooks. They're not distributed to their parts of the world. So finding a way to make high-quality information available on the web for free was pretty fundamental to what we're trying to do.
And this wasn't, I don't know how long Nature Education has been working on this, but was this kind of hard to break the paywall mentality within a publishing organization to be able to open up the education?
It is a new trend, and I'd be lying if I said there wasn't quite a lot of nervousness around what are the long-term implications behind doing something like this. But at the same time, when Nature Publishing Group decided to create a new education division in 2007, which I came over to start up, we were all very clear that this was going to be something new, something different, something driven by long-term social goals. And so I think we were all prepared for the fact that this was going to look very different from journals.
Right. And what has the feedback been so far? You launched mid 2010, right? And you've been working. The site's been live for about a little more than half a year. How's the reception been?
The response has been great. We actually launched in January of 2009, so we've been out.
Oh goodness, a little bit longer. Sorry,
a little bit longer than that. No, that's fine. A little bit longer than that. And the response has really been tremendous. There was a question in our mind: if you put high-quality information on the web, will faculty use it in their classes? Will students use it? And that question has been pretty definitively answered for us. Yes, the usage has grown month on month. The site is used in about 3,000 classrooms in more than 100 countries every day. New faculty come to the site, and the only question that we hear from our users is, when will you expand? When can you move beyond genetics and cell biology into other areas of life sciences? When can you move beyond life sciences into physical sciences? I think there's a very clear appetite around the world for this kind of thing.
Where do you find most of the people who are accessing the site come from?
They come from a number of places. We certainly put notices. Well, let me stop and ask: do you mean geographically, or how do they find out about the site?
Well, if you could take both of those points, that would be great. But I was thinking geographically.
Okay.
Are most of them? Are most of them the United States? Is it international? And you're finding a lot of third world access, or where does most of it come from?
About a third comes from the United States. Another third comes from Europe and other developed countries outside of the United States. And another third comes from the developing world. So we're actually getting quite a lot and a growing amount of usage from places that you traditionally can't reach with educational publications. And that's really heartening, because it's one of the core principles. Yes, we're trying to inject new life and enthusiasm and motivation into science education in the United States and in the UK and in other parts of the world like that. But we are also trying to make a career in science a reality for students who today would never consider it a reality in sub-Saharan Africa, in parts of East Asia. And increasingly, I see that becoming a reality. I see whole classrooms coming online in our site and learning genetics. And I will have to trace this for many years to see what the long-term impact is. But right away, I do know that we're connecting with students all over the world.
So tell me a little bit about, how Scitable works, the depth of the information that you have on the website, and what exactly do you mean when you say that it's a collaborative learning space?
Well, Scitable has two main components. One is a library of online content, and the second is a whole set of networking tools around that content. So I'll talk about both of those. The content is all newly created specifically for Scitable, and we did that so that we could make it available for free, because most of the information that's floating around in other publishers is good, but not available for free. So we created a new body of information, and that ranges from very basic introductory material for high school students all the way through the more in-depth kinds of experiences that you'd want college students to have, all the way up to hundreds of very richly researched and very carefully constructed overviews of emerging research areas for students who are moving from their senior year into the graduate into the graduate level. So depending on what the class level is, they can find content that's multimedia or content that's very text heavy. The social network is wrapped around the content to turn it into a kind of global classroom. That's how I think about it. So if you go to the site to learn about, let's say, the central dogma, you'll see on the same page all of the other students and faculty around the world who are studying the same topic. If they're on the site right now, you can connect with them, you can message with them, you can chat with them, even if you don't know them. If they're not on the site right now, you can send them a message, you can add them to your network, and you can form longer-term relationships. And what we see happening is that a student from India or from Senegal forms a long-term relationship with a researcher from Boston or a teacher from London. And they form these larger ad hoc networks around areas of shared interest. And you see learning becoming truly international.
That sounds fascinating. I was just noticing that there are, do students have blogs that they can put up as well within the community?
They do. We do have a number of blogs by researchers and faculty and journalists, and recently we decided to open up blogging to students themselves, and that's been fantastically successful. I think right now we have about 6 blogs by students, and that number is growing every month. Students are great bloggers. They're so curious. They have so much to say. They put so much personality into what they write. It's really been a breath of fresh air.
Looking at the website, how do you verify the information? So you say it's well researched, that each of these are very in-depth subject areas. But how do you verify the information is accurate that's being put out there?
So that's a very key part of what we do. There is a lot of information on the web and Wikipedia and sites like that, and it's okay. But we felt very strongly right from the beginning that we wanted to do something different. We wanted to create an authoritative body of content, first of all, so that it's good and reliable, but second of all, so that faculty and instructors can have confidence in it and they will be willing to use it in their classrooms. And the way we do that is through our rigorous editorial development and review processes that are modeled on similar processes that we use in our journal. We go out and commission leading scientists or researchers in the particular field that we want to cover to work closely with professional editors and also with a teacher who is currently teaching that subject in the classroom in a kind of pod. And this group of people will think about, from every angle, how can we teach this particular subject? The scientist will focus on what are the key points of knowledge that we want to communicate. The teacher will know what misconceptions most students have and will help us think about what's important to emphasize, what's less important to emphasize, what's the right level of detail for this age of student. And the professional editor knows how to take all of that insight and wisdom and turn that into a really well-constructed piece of content, whether that's a video or an article or something else. That is then sent out to exhaustive technical reviews to a number of other scientists in the field, all of whom weigh in and will point out nuances that they think we may have omitted in the science or experiments that they think we should make reference to. We'll route that back through an editorial board that's closely associated with us. They'll help us make decisions about what's in and what's out. And at the end of all of that process, we publish a really solid, reliable article. But that's also where it starts. Once we publish that article, we openly invite feedback from the community. And people do give us quite a lot of response. These can be teachers who are using this material in their classrooms. It can be other scientists pointing out other nuances that they think we should cover, and we will take that feedback, route it back through our editorial board, and if everybody agrees, we'll rewrite and re-release that article. So we're continually improving the content in the site.
That's neat. So it's almost like a Wikipedia style document in evolution, constant evolution, being improved. But the people who are working on it are experts in the field. They have really insightful angles to come at it from.
That's correct. And as a publisher, we manage that whole process. So it's not something where a user can directly edit the article. It all routes through us, and we make sure we keep the content quality high.
And in terms of doing that and keeping the content quality high and the investment that Nature must be putting into to keep the site going, to make it happen, to make it possible, to keep it open, where does the funding for this come from?
Well, initially it came from us, from Nature Publishing Group. This is something we believe very strongly in, and so we provided the seed foundation to get the resource up and running and develop the content and get it out there to the academic community. But then we went out and looked for corporate sponsors who, in a kind of NPR model, can underwrite the cost of keeping this content available for the world students. And we've been very fortunate to find a number of sponsors who have similar values and similar belief in the importance of education. Some of them are biopharma companies like Novartis and Roche. Some of them are biotech companies, companies like Alnylam and New England Biolabs. And some of them are technology companies, Intel and Tata Consultancy Services, for example. And these companies have given generously to subsidize the project. And in return, we tell the community of users that these companies are the reason they have free access. Of course, they have nothing to do with the content. We maintain complete editorial control, but I am very grateful for their support.
So again, similarly to the publishing model, where sponsors of a journal don't necessarily have input into the content of the articles that are published, the editorial control is held onto very carefully.
Exactly right.
Yeah, that's good to know. We don't want the education of tomorrow's scientists, of the students that are working right now, to be to be influenced in an undue manner by corporate influence. Thinking about the community as well. How many people do you have currently that you know of that are using it? How many teachers, how many students, how many scientists are involved?
We have a pretty steady base of around 200,000 teachers and students who are
Nice.
using the genetics and cell biology material every month. That's continuing to grow, but that's a pretty sizable chunk of the genetics and cell biology courses around the world. So we're pretty happy with that.
Yeah, I mean that's a really good number, actually. It would be great to see the number grow. It would be wonderful to see it, to see more people making use of the website and the material that's there. For getting it out to the public and getting people to become aware of it. Obviously talking about it on shows like this is one method, but what are you doing? How are you trying to spread the word?
Right. Well, we're using a number of approaches. We do put notices or advertisements about this in some of our journals, including Nature, from time to time. So many, I think, of our faculty users found out about the site that way. They saw an ad in Nature, they went online, they liked what they saw, and now they're using it in their classrooms. Word of mouth has been pretty powerful as well. This is a concept. This is a movement, high quality, open education in the sciences that people are getting very excited about, and they're happy to tell their peers. And as you know, in the scientific world, everybody's pretty interconnected, so that news travels fast.
Yeah.
And then we've actually been lucky to have really large numbers of people just coming in through search engines. In the world we live in today, both faculty and students will put mitosis into their search engine and look down the list, click on something that seems reputable, and if they like it, they'll stick with it for life.
Yeah, it's nice to come from a site that has Nature, as added onto it. There's a bit of accreditation right there that gives people, it gives the website the credibility that it needs for people to really click on it and use it.
Absolutely right. I think students have been using Wikipedia for the past several years, and Wikipedia is a great site. I use it for probably too many hours in a week to look up all kinds of things.
Yeah.
But teachers have grown, I think, mistrustful of it on some level because they don't know who's creating the content. And so
Yep.
They don't love the idea that their students are quoting from Wikipedia or using it in term papers or using that to study for tests and so on. So there's been a bit of a disconnect, and teachers for years have been looking for really credible, reputable online sources of information. And that, I think, is the gap that we're filling in people's minds. It comes from Nature. It comes from Nature Publishing Group. So they know the kind of editorial rigor we put behind it. So they trust it. And we don't disappoint. I think they use the resource, and they enjoy it. The students enjoy it, so they come back.
And is this meant to be a replacement for textbooks, or is this a supplement to the textbooks?
People are using it in both ways.
Okay.
There are certainly many faculty, I think in the hundreds now as it grows, who are running their classes entirely out of Scitable. Some in the U.S., some in Europe, and some in the developing world, who have found that there's such a richness of content here and also such great tools that they can run their whole class. There are also many faculty, I think in the thousands, who are using this as a supplement to the textbooks that they have. They find it a great space to direct their students to go beyond the basic knowledge and to explore how the real world of science works, the world of experiment and discovery and so on. So both of those groups are growing over time.
Do you think that has there been any special emphasis in the way that information is presented to try and really teach the process of science, not just because one of the complaints about textbooks for years has been that, it's facts. And so students read the textbooks, they get the facts out of the textbooks, they take the tests, they do okay on the tests, they get good grades, but they don't understand the process of science. Is Scitable doing anything to address that? It
is, and you've identified something that's at the absolute core of what we're trying to do with all the content we make available on Scitable, because we are Nature Publishing Group, and so our perspective on science is very much from within the world of research and the world of discovery. We feel very strongly that that's what we want to communicate to students, and in fact that's what makes science exciting to students. There are so many statistics, I'm sure you've heard them, that show that students lose interest in science during their college years. I think about 50% of students drop out of science programs between their freshman year and their senior year in college in the United States, for example. They don't drop out of college, but they drop out of science programs. So something is turning them off, and there have been plenty of studies that suggest that one of the main reasons they get turned off is they lose sight of why science was beautiful to them in the first place, back when they were looking at ants through a magnifying glass or looking at the stars through a telescope when they were kids. And the adult version of that same curiosity and wonder is research. That's when you get to produce new knowledge and come up with new discoveries that really help better the quality of life. That's what we love about science. That's what we want to bring to the way science is taught at every level, not just at the graduate levels, but at freshman year, at sophomore year, in high school. So every piece of content we write is written with that in mind. We never just teach students terms or teach them concepts that we want them to memorize. We always talk to them about where those concepts come from. What were the milestone experiments that somebody performed that helped them discover this piece of knowledge? What hypothesis did they frame? Why? What data did they get that surprised them? How did they interpret that data? How did they build consensus in the scientific community for their ideas? And then how did somebody come along 10 years later and completely overturn that? It's that rough and tumble, that ferment, that inspiration of science we try to bring to every concept that we teach. And I think that's one of the reasons that faculty in particular are really drawn to the site, and one of the reasons that students find it effective.
Yeah. In the website, you said that this is college, high school level. So it's fairly advanced material. This isn't basic material. Something that has popped up a lot in the last couple of weeks since President Obama's State of the Union address. He spoke a lot about STEM education, which is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education. And how it needed to get more money behind it, more emphasis behind it across the nation. The nation's report card came out. We're finding that half of our students are not proficient in the sciences. We're finding there was a study that came out, said something like 79% of high school seniors aren't proficient. And additionally, there was this article, I think, with the nation's report card, 29% of white high school seniors scored below the national basic proficiency. 71% of black students fell short. We need education reforms, but do you think there's any other way to get students more interested in learning? What do we need to do to improve the performance of the students in our country?
Well, it's an enormously important and also an enormously difficult question.
I know it's huge.
But it's a great one. It's one I love thinking about. There are so many things that I think we need to do. I think the real answer to helping to improve science education is that there is no silver bullet. We could improve the quality of teachers, which is an issue that a lot of people talk about, having more and better trained science teachers at every level, K through 12. And that, I think, would make a big impact, but only if we also focus on the quality of learning materials, and that would make a big impact, but only if we also focus on the neighborhoods and so on. So I think it will take a little bit of everything. I would say, though, that a lifetime engagement with science starts when kids are young. Yeah. And if you don't learn to look around and be curious about the world that you encounter when you're 6 and 7 and 8, it may be difficult to help you develop that when you're in high school. So we have to start in the right place, I think. And part of that comes from parents, and part of that is a cycle. If parents who graduate from high school have a good understanding of science, they'll be much more likely to help their kids start to love science when they're young. So that's part of it. Part of it comes from the quality of teachers that we have teaching science in an elementary school. You don't have dedicated science teachers in elementary school. So it's really important for us to make sure that the teachers we do have in first grade and second grade do have a strong science background, that they're not afraid of science, that they love it too, so they can pass that on to kids. And then as kids get older, I think what we need to focus on doing is keeping that initial spark alive, both through the quality of classroom education, which comes down a lot from teachers and the state of the schools and also the state of the learning materials, but also that there are plenty of really interesting opportunities outside of school for them to get involved in science, whether they're science fairs or field trips, lots of opportunities that don't feel like chores, that help expose them to the world around them. And I think it goes on from there. I think at every stage we have to keep that initial spark alive and develop it. Now there are concrete things that we need to do as a country, and there have been many great reports written about what those are. Rising Above the Gathering Storm, and the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology recently released a really great report about this. We have to make national investments in training teachers at the college level who are committed to going back into K-12 education and teaching students science. We have to create more scholarships to bridge students, particularly from low-income backgrounds in high school who have an interest in science, into college programs where they could become researchers. We have to incentivize teachers at the collegiate level to spend a lot of time and focus on teaching and not just on the kind of research that will enable them to pass the publish and perish test. So there are a lot of different things that I think all need to fall into place.
Yeah, there are definitely a number of different branches that need to come together to make the changes that are necessary. I'm going to take a quick break right now to thank our sponsor for this hour of Dr. Kiki's Science Hour, MailRoute. MailRoute.info. Businesses of every size use MailRoute. It could be one user, 50,000 users. Doesn't matter. MailRoute is going to protect you and all those users from spam and viruses. It's meant to simplify your life and make your email usable again. MailRoute is a secure hosted service. It filters viruses and spam for companies or individuals. MailRoute eliminates those viruses and spam, lowers your costs, reduces the load on your email server, and typical MailRoute customers see about a 95% reduction in their inbound email volume. Virtually no false positives. That's good. We like that. We don't like the little suckers that slip through into your inbox. Leo here at Twit loves MailRoute, and so does Tom Merritt. Both of them have been using the service for years and have been able to use email domains once again that they thought lost forever to the ravages of the internet, the email spam and virus scourge. So there's nothing easier for you to do really than the filtering that MailRoute offers. No hardware, no software. You just sign up with MailRoute. Change your MX records for your domain so that the mail flows right through their servers. They do the work for you on their end. It's really easy. So here's the deal. You visit mailroute.info and sign up. That's pretty much it. As a Twit listener, you're going to receive a 10% discount for the life of your account. And so don't go to mailroute.com. That's where everyone else goes. Mailroute.info is a special site just for Twit listeners. Small business accounts start at $2 per month per user, $2 per user per month for $10. Because of demand from the Twit Army, there's been a new service for individuals added as well. Less than $30 per user per year for single users. Go visit mailroute.info, sign up with the email filtering service that Tom and Leo use. Now back to the show. We're talking with Vikram Savkar from Nature Publishing Group, Nature Education, and their website, Scitable, which is a community for, let me see if I can bring this up, a collaborative learning space for science. And we're talking about science education in the United States at the moment. Before we went to the break, we were talking about a number of things that possibly would need to occur to improve the state of science education in the United States. Now, Vikram, I'm just wondering your opinion on. We talk about proficiency in the sciences. Now, what do you think about the difference between scientific knowledge, so the knowledge of facts, versus understanding, and whether or not that kind of proficiency, the proficiency of understanding science, is coming through in these assessments of our schools?
It's a great question, and there's been a lot of debate about that. And different tests measure different kinds of thinking capabilities. There's the test that you're referring to that came out recently. There's also the PISA scores, which are the international scores, and our place in that ranking has been dropping over the years, and we're well down the ranking, so people are very worried about that. And all of these tests measure different capabilities. Some of them focus on scientific knowledge, as you say, knowing all the basic facts, and some of them focus on the ability to think creatively and apply the knowledge to solve problems. I think both are important, but in different ways and for different purposes. When we think about what the goals for science education are for our country, there are several. At the highest end, we want to make sure that we're producing sufficient numbers of really talented researchers who can come up with the discoveries that revolutionize our world in medicine, in food, in space travel, and in physics, and so on. But as those ideas trickle out into broader society and into the economy, they help us start research and development organizations and new industries. They help revolutionize industries, and we need highly talented people to work in those industries. And then there are plenty of people, the largest number of people, who won't be in either of those categories, who will go on to lives in any number of other professions. And it's important to us that they're scientifically literate, that they understand and that they appreciate and value science on a basic level so that they can pass that same understanding on to their children, but from a political perspective, so that as a country we can be united in backing the kinds of national investments and national priorities that support science and help our country continue to advance. I think different kinds of tests measure different qualities that align with these different things. The tests that the Olympiads and so on that are designed to figure out what our creative capacity are important because we need to produce researchers. But I think even the tests that measure just basic scientific knowledge are pretty valid because we have that large set of people that we want to be scientifically literate. So I think each has their place.
But what do you think about what do you think is scientific literacy? What are the basic things that people need to know to be able to be considered literate, to be able to function as a productive member of our society in modern society? And has that changed over, say, the last 50 years? Has it gotten more complicated?
I think there are two categories of things that fall into scientific literacy. One is there's just a basic set of knowledge that we can all have access to through the educations we get, and that we should come out knowing. We should all understand about heredity and DNA, for example. We should all understand basic physics and basic chemistry. There's simply certain bits of knowledge that we should all have as our shared patrimony.
Right, gravity. It works.
Gravity, exactly. Don't try to get around it.
Yeah.
But the other side of it is understanding what science is, how it works, what it's based on, being able to think scientifically about the world, understanding that a scientific mindset involves asking for evidence and constantly asking, where's the evidence? Not being satisfied with dogma, but trying to figure out what are the facts and what conclusions can we draw from them. And at the same time, understanding that there is no such thing as facts in science, that there's consensus, there are theories, there's consensus, and then eventually, over time, there are nuances that are added to that consensus, and they become new knowledge, they become new, quote-unquote, facts. So simultaneously understanding the evidentiary foundations of the things we know, and having the humility to understand that these things change and evolve as we all work together to develop new knowledge. That, I think, in and of itself, apart from any specific piece of scientific knowledge, is incredibly important for us to have in common as a society. That, I think, is what keeps us able to operate in conjunction with each other, in collaboration with each other, in dialogue with each other, to have a shared vocabulary and to have a shared understanding of what the problems we face are, like climate change, for example, and to be able to devote our energies to working on those.
I come across websites and the topics controversial, quotes, what people would consider controversial outside of the sciences, topics such as evolution or climate change. You read articles in the media. I mean, part of scientific literacy also, I think, involves being able to process information that you read in the media and be able to understand what they're talking about and maybe not get caught up in sensationalist hype, or at least that's the hope. And I see these well-written articles talking about teaching evolution or talking about evidence that comes up that about various aspects of the climate and climate change. And the articles are well-written, and then the comment section below is usually riddled with all sorts of benighted comments. And very often there's a terminology problem at the heart of it, where for evolution, people argue it's just a theory. And for over the last 20 years, 2 decades, I've been watching people in the media try and help people understand that theory in scientific terminology is different from theory in everyday use. People still don't get it. Do you think we're ever going to get past these just very basic misunderstandings?
I wish I could say I see it coming right around the corner, but actually we seem to be all be getting a little bit farther apart, don't we? Over the recent decades, somehow we've split into camps as a country, and there isn't a whole lot of listening going on. And I would say those of us who believe in science and understand its value for the world spend a lot of time talking to each other. And those people who discredit science and think that it conflicts with the beliefs that they have spend a whole lot of time talking to each other. And as the media develops, there are more and more ways for us to talk to people just like us through social networks and all kinds of websites. And it seems like there are fewer and fewer ways for us to talk to each other as a society as a whole. Outside of the Super Bowl last week, there really isn't anything that we all watch, for example, on television. So it does seem like we are drifting into camps and we're getting polarized. So I don't think it's going to be easy for us to bring it back together. The place where I think it truly does come back together is in the education system, particularly the public education system, but the education system as a whole. That's where our shared cultural values are disseminated, and that's where we're meant to all breathe them in as kids and to live out those values for the rest of our lives. And those values include things like understanding the value of science, but they also include ideas like community and being able to have dialogue with each other. I would say we should take a hard look at why those values are no longer coming through to society as a whole. So you and I have been talking for a while about how to make science education in particular stronger throughout the educational system. But I think we should also be talking about what values are we communicating through the schools, outside the schools, and the communities.
Yeah. Where the entire education system, the entire where it goes from the community to the schools, and the back and forth. What are the lessons that our children are learning? And very often they're not learning productive lessons. There's a lot of shouting matches out there.
Yes.
A lot of shouting and, like you said, not listening. And I mean, bring it back to the open textbook, open education idea that the web is really pivotal in allowing these days. Do you think that this area is going to grow? It's not, it's something that nature has been able to do, been able to get sponsors to support. How are we going to be able to allow? Are we really going to be able to, foster more collaborative learning spaces? Scitable is dealing with biology, physics, younger websites for younger kids. How do we get past, local school boards and textbook battles to be able to really open up education?
I think this is one that I can say I really think is right around the corner. There is a tremendous amount of momentum building around the idea of open education in our country and also worldwide. There are a number of really wonderful people who have created this idea of open education, helped to make it a reality over the last 10 years. People like Kathy Casserly, who was formerly at the Hewlett Foundation, people like Jerry Hanley, who runs Merlot, which is an online website at the college level for open education, and dozens and dozens of more people. And the work they've done over the last 10 years has filtered out around the school systems and slowly built. And I believe that 2010 and 2011 are the years when it's finally breaking into public conversation. I've seen a number of really highly regarded reports written over the last 6 months. One that was the feature of a conference that the president hosted on community colleges that are specifically about this idea of open education. There's been an enormous multi-billion-dollar fund that the White House has just announced to support open education at the community college level, and so on. And everywhere I look, every day I see more news items like this. I think people have reached the point where they see the power of what this kind of open approach to education. They see the quality, in part, I think, because people are focusing a lot on the quality, as we are. And I think they see the benefit. It increases the accessibility to all kinds of students, lowers the barrier to entry. So I think on this one, we really are at the inflection point right now.
Do you think that the web and technology have more to offer in this arena?
I do. I think we're really just at the beginning. Over the past 10 years, there's been a proliferation of lots of different resources. If I focus on science specifically, in different fields of science. One person does a great website in genetics. Another person does a great virtual lab on titration, and a little bit here and a little bit there. And what's happening now is that the community as a whole is coming together and realizing that it's time to bring all this together, invest pretty heavily and deeply in the kinds of infrastructure, both physical infrastructure and web infrastructure, that allow this material to be used systematically in schools. So I think actually the greater part of the development is still ahead of us. We're going to build as a community, systems that allow schools to run on open materials and have a consistent, coherent, and high-quality experience. And I think the web is very much what makes possible bringing all these pieces together.
Do you think that the web and this these open education portals have do they threaten the education system at all? Are we looking at maybe not Scitable, but something like it replacing science classes?
Yes. Anytime I think you have something quite new, there are some people who are really excited, some people who are indifferent, and some people who are really opposed. And that's been true here. I don't think that anybody feels that sites like Scitable will replace classrooms, and we're certainly not trying to do that. We're trying to strengthen classrooms by putting really high-quality materials into them. And I know many of the other people in the open education movement, I think they have the same goals. So not on that count. But there is something interesting about the richness of material on the web, which is that it can be harder to get your head around. If you're a teacher, for example, you've been assigning a textbook to a student for 15 years, you know exactly what's in that textbook cover to cover. It's the same thing every day. It's the same thing every year. And you have a lot of control over what your student is getting exposed to. Once you move all of that experience on the web, there are fewer limits. Yes, you make sure your student takes certain courses and simulations and so on, but they can also explore much more widely. You lose that ability to control what they encounter, and that can be vertiginous. That can be a little bit scary, I think, to many people. But I think on the whole, the benefits are so clear. There's so many different voices that can be brought into the conversation about science through this kind of approach. Certainly, it's less expensive. Certainly, it can reach more students in more different kinds of communities. So I think the benefits are so strong that they've vastly outweighed the apprehension.
Are there resources out there for teachers to learn how to use this new material? I mean, like you said, it can be something that can cause apprehension and fear in a teacher who's used to teaching the same thing day in, day out, knows the material as it was 3 to 4 years ago, but not the most up-to-date information that might be constantly added to a living document, to a living resource. Is there anything out there that can help teachers learn how to navigate the new environment?
That's a wonderful suggestion. If there is right now, I don't know of it, and if it isn't there, somebody should definitely create that, because I think it's a great suggestion. Everything needs to be taught, and this is a new world, and people do need to be taught how to make use of this world. There was a report recently written on open education in community colleges, which I just mentioned was featured in in a conference by the president, and I spoke at length with Hal Plotkin, who wrote that report, and one of his conclusions that he drew was the reason more community colleges haven't gotten involved in open education is because they don't know how, and therefore they haven't made a systematic commitment top-down from the chancellor's office out to do so. So I think what you're suggesting is exactly needed, some training path for chancellors and deans, and also for faculty themselves.
How have you handled it? I mean, you've been working in the digital space, textbook education for a decade or more. How do you find it getting your head around all this information and the changing landscape as it's constantly changing?
I think I've gone through the same growing pains as a consumer of this information that we all have, which is a good thing, because I think it helps me and all the other people here have a stronger sense of how we can do this well for other people. Without question, the challenge that we face as consumers of information on the internet today is not that there isn't enough information, but that there's too much, and that most of it isn't so good. So the thing that we have to get really good at right away is sifting quickly between what's good and what's not good, learning what to trust or whom to trust, and also learning how to keep a critical distance from what we read until we figure out what value it should have to us. So those lessons as consumers of information, we've tried to build into what we do. It's one of the reasons why, although we do let our community of users upload their own content to the site and share it with the community, we keep that separate from the information that we publish, because we believe that the teachers who use our site want the kind of information that we're making available, but they also want us to keep it simple and straightforward. They don't want us to mix it up with a lot of other content that they don't know and that they don't know whether they can trust. So, for example, even though it's online and easy to click from one piece to the next, we try to keep it very well organized, keep very tight control over what we publish.
Yeah, and the ease of navigation and streamlining things probably reduces a certain amount of fear of new material in a user's mind, especially a teacher's mind. We're getting to the we're getting to the end of the hour here. I'm just curious about your own path into education and how you came to be working with Scitable, with Nature Education and the Nature Publishing Group. You started in physics, the classics. How did you move from studying science to being interested in helping everyone learn about science?
I grew up in a science education family. My mother is a professor of chemistry at Northern Virginia Community College. I grew up in the Northern Virginia area. And I grew up very much in the world of the classroom. I was with my mother a lot on campus. I took classes. As I got older and got into high school, I saw her students come to visit her and saw her conversations with her students. And very early on, I developed a sense that what was going on here is teaching of the younger generation was really quite a wonderful thing. There were so many ways that I could see that. Part of it was the ways that students' lives changed. If you teach at a community college, you're teaching students who may have had some hard knocks for any number of reasons. They may have come from foreign countries and they may be refugees here. In Virginia, that was certainly true. Or they may be born here, but they've had a little bit of trouble in high school. And when they come out the other end of community college, they're inspired, they have options, they have control over their own lives. Is really a wonderful thing to see. So I came away from that experience feeling that education is a really powerful, transformative force. And at some point after I graduated from college, I thought about my interest in science and my interest in classics and how I could combine that. And educational publishing seemed like a great way to bring it all together and try to make an impact.
And your background in physics, we mentioned earlier in the show, Scitable is currently only delving into the biological sciences. Are you pushing to get the physical sciences represented on Scitable as well anytime soon?
We are. Our plan is to expand across all the life and physical sciences gradually over a period of time. So we started with genetics. We expanded recently to cell biology and ecology. Over the next couple of years, we want to cover the remaining life sciences and then move over into the physical sciences so that eventually it becomes a comprehensive library.
Well, I think that would be just fabulous, and I'm sure there are going to be many, many people who are going to be interested in using the expanded library as it grows. Thank you so much for joining me today on Dr. Kiki's Science Hour. I appreciate your conversation and your insight into this, into this pressing question of how to educate the public.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. This has been Dr. Kiki's Science Hour. Our guest today was Vikram Savkar. He works with the Nature Publishing Group. He's the VP and Publishing Director at Nature.com's website, Scitable, which the website is nature.com/Scitable, Scitable. And that is a collaborative learning space for science. If you haven't checked it out, I really recommend giving it a read. There are some great topics within the website that you can learn a lot about if you didn't already know much about them. And even if you did know stuff about them, you'll probably learn something. I know I have myself. That does it for this show this week. Next week, I will be back, hopefully not with a head cold and hopefully not yet with child. So we're trying to get through this pregnancy, make it to my due date on time, one day at a time. But next week I'll be back. I'm interviewing Kirk Sorensen. He is an engineer, nuclear physicist, and we're going to be talking about thorium reactors, the alternative to uranium and plutonium nuclear reactors. It should be a really interesting conversation. So I hope that you will join me next week for Dr. Kiki's Science Hour. In the meantime, you can catch me, as always, on the interwebs if you look for Dr. Kiki in the Google. I'm at Dr. Kiki, DRKIKI on Twitter. You can subscribe to Dr. Kiki's Science Hour and listen to this episode and other past episodes if you just go to twit.tv/Kiki. That's TWIT.tv/KIKI. I will see you next week. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Science Hour. All I ask is 1 hour a week. And remember, 1 hour a week makes your world so much more interesting. See you later.